I think, people's power really symbolize how direct democracy is in action. And of course, we would like to see a sort of peaceful process of transferring, people's power, people's right into orderly development of direct democracy. However, as we see in the video and other sources, we have a lot of violence taking place. Of course, violence plays a positive role, sometimes forcing, very important political change. But on the other hand, it's very costly, for the polity. And so in that sense, we have 7, specialists here, academics as well as activists involved in study of how to transform people's power into direct democracy. First stage is to invite in our 7 participant panelists to really articulate this process of how to translate people's power into direct democracy. And ideally, it can be done in theoretical terms in one area, but also in empirical terms, in terms of experience of your country, of your region, and so on. And so, start from my left, Professor Lee from Taiwan. Okay.
Thank you very much.
My presentation focuses on Taiwan referendum 2018 and its initiative and referendum theory and practice of direct democracy in Asia, divided essentially into 2 parts. First part, Taiwan's new referendum model became a good example of direct democracy in Asia. From the Sunflower Movement to 2018 referendum in Taiwan, it shows that Taiwan has become the good example to Asia to be a new age towards direct democracy. From now on, the Taiwanese citizens who came out to the age of 18 have to vote the initiative proposal launched by citizen groups since 2018. Taiwan introduced instruments of direct democracy in recent years. In 2018, the Taiwanese Referendum Act was amended and passed by the Single Parliament Legislative Yuan. It facilitates the referendum process and lowers the precondition for citizens to launch an initiative proposal. Currently, only 1,879 supporters in the first and around 280,000 signatures in the second phase and required to support an initiative, while the acceptance quorum is lower to 489,000 voters. For now on, we can vote. 10 initiative proposals have been voted, covering the issues as ratification of Taiwan name, same-sex marriage, same-sex education, anti-air pollution, nuclear energy, nuclear food disaster, environmental protections. Of course, they have the criticism and controversies. In the first time on referendum 2018, held under the revised Referendum Act, some issues which could be seen as populistic were adopted. Several proposals weakening the rights of same-sex marriage were accepted. Also, the ban on nuclear energy was reversed. It was claimed that the political party influenced the outcome by unfair campaigning. In addition, on the same day, citizens had to decide about 10 referendum issues and voted in elections. It might be beneficial to have elections and referendum decisions on different days to allow a more profound debate among citizens and prevent voter confusion. Referendum is not a consultative vote. The referendum vote results have valid effect by law. Referendum is not like opinion poll. Once voted, the government have to follow the decision making by the people. If not, it's not a real direct democracy. For example, Taiwanese public voted against the government's policy of phasing out the nuclear power by 2025. But the government will still follow this policy. The government's goal to make Taiwan a nuclear-free homeland by 2025 remain unchanged. And referendum cannot tie with elections. We talked about this yesterday. Now the second part. Creation a neo-political system of direct democracy in Asia. The political system of the direct democracy has become the core solution of a traditional representative democracy. So I did a survey for 16 Asian countries. I tried to create a neo-Asian political system of direct democracy as 3 governance models: semi-direct democracy, semi-representative democracy, and a representative democracy, or direct democracy, followed by Zog and Hammond. That is my survey.
Okay. Time is up.
That means they could be waiting to promote. Up.
Yeah.
Up.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let me start with this my presentation in connections of the direct democracy. Is with the shocking articles that's really predicting democracy will end someday, and then, but you can check later on in Google's. But this is our assessments. We did our assessment. We did a lot of study, interview with all our members. Then it's come out with a shopping list of the democracy problems that we encounter in Asia. I think you can pretty much agree, and we can debating in case something you don't agree. But everything is anchored within these three angles. Where in the top list is almost all the people, all the countries in Asia, we are encountering intolerances, violence, extremism, and political identities. And many of the countries in Asia evidently having growing populism, authoritarianisms. And last but not least is in our eyes, there is non-democratic country influence starts increasing in our society, including our countries. So to respond to that question, I'll try to bring to reflecting whether this direct democracy is really connecting with our struggles. So the pattern of people power ranging from peaceful civic movement to violent revolution protests. My immediate comment, or our comment, it is very good. The street protest is showing the alarm democracy still works. I think in many countries in Asia, especially in South and Southeast Asia, the only way we are really able to vulgarly express our direct democracy is through street protests. Street protest is the only way for us, especially in the current context where there's a huge frustrations, and then there is like a block of the democracy mechanisms within the parliament, within the judiciary, and within the governments. People still able to organize, and there is still space to do it. What we see right now in Hong Kong, Indonesia, part of Thailand, part of the Philippines, many other places in South Asia, they still can come out because they still have space to express on the street. But many of our friends, even they couldn't express openly in social media or even on the street because of the harm, repressions of the states. So the reflection I think the way we are learning about how this direct democracy can benefiting to us, many activists in Southeast and South Asia, we try to reflect what the results of the current movement when we are start developing the post-protest through the direct democracy. I think there is plenty of times where we successful to carry on the protests, but then again there is time of the honeymoon with the new governments, and then again we've been cheated, and then always repetition happenings, especially at the moment of times where elections could not be very reliable anymore, because we identifying the election is one area that been captured by the ruling parties especially, and then the populist authoritarianism. So for many of us, actually election is a venture that is very difficult to be trusted. We always learn in South Asia and Southeast Asia, the bad guy can be turned as a heroes. I don't need to mention about the names, but sometimes the hero of democracy and human rights can be turned to be useless. This is happening only in our region. It's finished. All right, so I hope I can have more time to explore. But then again, I guess we're delivering the message from many of our friends of activists. We really would like to learn how actually this direct democracy can really benefiting our struggle, especially in the current context of triangle, our mitigating front. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
International experience have shown us that the direct democracy instruments have been implemented in most cases by governments, which is to say by government authorities, which has been translated in many cases into weakness while making effective these instruments in recent years. Free Latin American countries adopt the revocation of mandate for all positions, Venezuela, Bolivia, and Ecuador. I want to tell you a little that in the Mexican case, the instruments of direct democracy are executed and the results validated by an autonomous body in the government, the Congress, and the jurisdictional authorities. That implies an atypical model of implementation of these instruments in comparison at least with the Latin American experience, since it is sought that citizens participate in a climate of trust. Now, I must point out regarding the Mexican experience, which I think will be of most important for the Asian countries, three fundamental elements. The first one that has to do with the binding nature of this exercise. It's very important to point out that this exercise, to become relevant, they must be mandatory for the responsibility authority, which is to say the authority submit to a referendum must comply with the result of said exercise. To achieve this, the percentage of participation must be discussed without a doubt, so that this exercise becomes mandatory. But it is transcendental that results produced are added to by all the authorities involved and be respected. This is why the legislation would seek to establish the minimum participation rates so that authorities respect results obtained. In the Mexican case, in particular, Mexico City has minimum percentage for it to be binding. That is at least 1/3 of the people registered in the first that is used for constitutional elections must participate. The second element has to do with the authority which is in charge for organization the exercise. It seems to me that the Mexican experience should be considered as a reference, since it is the autonomous bodies that have the faculty, and this result is greater confidence in this type of exercise. the fact that the authorities responsible for the political exercise are not those that organize and make the declaration of results have very positive effects, so the citizens participate and can exercise the right thinking that their vote will be respected. And finally, we must consider an issue that is currently being debated in many parts of the world that has to do with the legitimacy of these who activate these types of instruments. It is the administrative authority, the president or the head of state, the governors or mayors who must activate these mechanisms and invite the citizens to submit to referendum issues of general interest. From my point of view, this is not the most correct way of thought. We should not completely disqualify that possibility. In my opinion, those who should activate this type of instruments are the citizens, since this exercise serves as bridge of distinction between representative democracy and popular discontent. We must be clear that many times this exercise has been misused, as is in the case with the revocation of mandate referendum or the plebiscite, which have served as legitimate instrument of authoritarian governments. This is a great challenge involved in exercising and applying citizens' rights that are designed to solve or propose solution to problems this representative democracy itself is not addressing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, just to give a very quick situation, in Tunisia we have a revolution that happened in 2011, so we are the youngest democracy perhaps in this global forum. And since that we go through processes of democracy. We have a first election in 2011 that arrived to a new constitution that was adopted in 2014 by 200 votes with 12 against and 4 abstention, that gave a parliament regime, a local authority empowered, and mixed Islamic and universal references. Since that, we have 2 other elections that happened. One is for the legislative in 2014, and give the result that we have after that a coalition of the 2 first parties that start to govern together. But what happened is that the first party after the election was divided in different groups, and so the situation and the stability of the government was not so good after that. So we have 5 years of almost political instability. And after that we have local elections in 2018, and which is remarkable on that election is that we have the first position was won by independent list and no parties. If we look to the situation in Tunisia, people have a lot of problems, and especially social economic problem. Some people say that the situation before was better than after the revolution. But if we ask people about their opinion, what is the best regime, they still want a democratic regime. And so the democracy is, we could say that it's safe, and there is no change. The majority make the choice of a democratic regime. What is also important that we have people feel that there is a big freedom of association, a big freedom of also to criticize government without any fear. And if we compare Tunisia, here you have a list of different Arabic countries, and here is Tunisia, we have the best situation of freedom in our country. If we ask them about women's rights, freedom of expression, media freedom, we have a very high percent. So people feel really that they are free and there is no fear from the government about their right. If the problem is that there is some doubt about the future of the country, and if we ask people about if the situation of the country is going on the wrong way or on the right direction, we have a majority that they are saying that it's going to the wrong way. And it's mainly because the employment and the economic cost of the life. This gives some problem, which so economic and financial crisis is the most important, biggest problem facing the country and also the employment. We have the same percent about people going to vote to change this situation, but also people that protest on the street to change this situation. So it's not, they think that when you protest and put you protest on the street, it's possible to change the situation and make the government take the good decision. Independent people that participate and has a very good result in the elections. We will have next Sunday, in 2 days, the parliamentary election and the second round of the presidential election on next Sunday. What I have to say is that the winner of these elections also is the only candidate who speaks about direct democracy on his program, and he is also the only one who gave a lot weight in his program of local government and for his program for the future. So thank you, and sorry for that.
There is no direct democracy in Belgium. There is no referendum. So I'm very envious of the Dutch neighbors. I just saw the Dutch person leave. That's a pity because I wanted to ask him a question. They have referendum. We heard about it yesterday. The French were also asked to give their opinion about the European treaty. But in Belgium we weren't given this opportunity. And why is that? I don't know. I think our politicians are afraid of asking our opinion. And that's because of the complex situation, political situation in Belgium. I think many of you are aware, we have a southern part, the Walloons speaking French, we have a northern part, the Dutch speaking, the Flemish speaking Dutch. We vote differently. In the northern part we vote for a more right government, and the southern part it's more socialist, more left. We don't see eye to eye on many things. So there's not only the language issue, there is also cultural issues and so on. Now, in the 1950s, there was a referendum on the political question of Belgium. It had to do with the end of the World War and the German occupation. And so our government retreated to the UK, but the king stayed. And the king was scolded for staying. He was called a traitor. And this divided the north and the south tremendously. This referendum. So in the north, the Flemish people voted to have the king stay. It's complicated. So he stayed, but then of course, because he stayed and he didn't leave the country, he was criticized, and so he left. He went into exile to Switzerland, and then he came back after the war, and then the question was raised: can he take up office again, yes or no? And so, since this was so difficult, people talked about it for 5 years, and in 1950, okay, let's ask the people what they want, referendum. Can the king stay? So the north says yes, the south says no. He stayed, but then I think a couple of years later, riots broke out in the south, and so really the situation was untenable, and he had to abdicate. So he left his position to his son. Now that's what we call in Belgium the royal issue. And so we're still a monarchy now, but this is really a divisive issue. So right now we're a federal government, with a Flemish government, Walloon government, even German government. Okay, I have to stop here. Yeah. So, but that's the problem. We have no referendum, I guess, because we're so afraid of this divisive issue in our country. That's, I guess, my reasoning of why we don't know much about referendum in Belgium. Okay, and then I will tell the rest of the story in the next part.
Thank you. Now we turn to Japan. Mia.
Good morning. My name is Mia Kamioka from Japan, civic activist. I'm sharing information important for humanity, such as direct democracy, universal basic income, with sovereign money especially, and chemical sensitivity. Today, I'd like to share the case study and findings from local referendums in Okinawa, Japan. As you know, initiatives and referendum is a strong tool to give power to people. However, design of them in Japan is not so good, especially in 2 points. First, voting result is not binding. Second, local councils are allowed to ignore the legal number of signatures gathered. An example of the first point is, in Okinawa, local referendum were held twice about building a new American military base in Henoko, Okinawa. One was 22 years ago, and one is this year. Both said no to a new American base. However, voting result is not binding, and Japanese government ignored both. Another example on second point is Ishigaki City. Ishigaki City is a small island. The population is less than 50,000. And then there is a problem, issues. Cities are going to build a base of self-defense force in the small island. And then people gathered enough number of signatures, which is 40% of eligible voters in 1 month. Isn't it amazing? It's small islands, but the 40% of eligible voters in 1 month. But Ishigaki City Council refused to hold a referendum. Isn't it terrible? Yeah. Actually, throughout Japan, around 600 initiatives which gathered enough number of signatures were rejected by the local councils. So the people gathered enough number of legal signatures, but they couldn't have a referendum. So Japanese politicians easily disregard the will of people. It's very terrible. It should never ever allow to happen, but it happens very often. This is a serious crisis of democracy, and the society where democracy doesn't work will be deconstructed from inside. It's a course of nature. Japanese constitution clearly states that the sovereignty resides with the people. We must match the referendum system to the constitution of Japan. There are 2 points to improve. First, makes the voting result binding. Second, initiatives which legal number of signatures gathered must be followed by a referendum with no exception. We need to improve initiatives and referendum system, and it's possible actually to start it at local council. Starting at the local council will be the point to give real power to people in Japan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mia.
And we all know that the world is, the world has been in constant controversy. I mean, the entire history of the world. But if you look around the world now, whether it's the United States, or whether it's China, or whether it's India, Pakistan, European Union, there's so much conflict. Yemen, Saudi Arabia, there's just so much conflict. There's so much going on. And the question becomes, what can we do about it? This actually does tie into direct democracy because, listen, I've been working the last year in Ukraine, and when you look at what's happening with Russia and the Donbass and Crimea, I sit back and I think about, how is all this going to be resolved? I don't want to cast aspersions on all the world leaders, but honestly, when you look back and you think about who is going to help lead the charge to try to bring normalcy back to our country. And listen, we're all realists. There's never going to be total normalcy in our world. But it's about what can we do and who can help lead us to get there. And this is where we come back to Taiwan. I will tell you that, I've been lucky to hear speeches and unlucky to hear speeches around the world. But I tell you what Joe Matthews said as he walks out the room. I'll speak more about him when he leaves. But what Joe said at the beginning of the conference, he says how Taiwan is the center of the world. Yeah, some people may think it's hokey, some people may think why, but truly, when you think about it, it is. If you look around the world and you look about opportunities to make a difference. Now, I know we're supposed to talk about. I really don't know what we're supposed to talk about, but I want to talk about this. Whatever Michael tells me to talk about, I'll talk about. But the reality is, if you look at what the opportunities are, yes, Taiwan has done some amazing things using direct democracy, yes. And another thing I will say, that we can sit here and talk forever about signature requirements, distribution requirements, voter thresholds, whether or not supermajorities, or whether or not you need to have this much time, how much money, we can talk about that ad nauseum. We can. And but one thing I want to stress, and we all know this, there's no perfect lawmaking process in this world, and there never will be. This won't happen. We talked yesterday about, direct democracy at the UN level. One thing that makes me excited about that is, sadly, in many ways, I think the UN is an organization that will eventually fail. Sadly, I think it's true. And so we must, as human beings, try to find a way for the next generation, the next method, the next process that can help the world. Thank you very much.